Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. I think that might be the first time I've ever stumbled on that. How are you, brother?
I'm great. Fun weekend. People showed up for Porch Tour. Thank you, Porch Tour people, and more dates coming.
Awesome. Very nice. And what's the website to go to get the Porch Tour tickets?
PorchTour.com. I got Minnesota next week, then Bethlehem, Pittsburgh, Richmond, Virginia Beach, North Carolina. We're going to be long hauling in my car that's going to die.
Oh, dude, your car's hanging on. Your car's like an old dog that just walks in the room. They're like, oh, man, he just laid down. He's not going anywhere for a while. Dude, that's awesome, man. I hear so much great stuff about the Porch Tour. I really do. Genuinely, people who are like, dude, I saw Rob out here. It was phenomenal. So that's awesome. Go check out the Porch Tour, porchtour.com. That's what you said?
Mm-hmm.
And of
Vegas.
course,
we got Vegas.
We got Las Vegas coming up this weekend. Me and Rob are going to go out there. We're going to gamble. We're going to, I don't know, maybe go to like the owner of a hotel, take him in a penthouse room, tell him, think of a number. That's what we want you to sell to us for.
We're going to put in offers on hotels.
I get in his face about slapping my brother around. I'm doing a Godfather thing. Anyway, yes, Las Vegas this weekend. Very much looking forward to that. Wise guys, 4 shows between Friday and Saturday night. ComicDaveSmith.com for all those tickets and a bunch more stuff. We just got some new dates up on the site. Me and Rob are coming around the country, so hope to see you guys out there. All right. So I was thinking about something that I wanted to open today's show with, and I'll tell you how I got there. And how I got to this point where I was really just like thinking about this a lot over the last couple days. This is not just, by the way, before I get to the point, I'm not claiming any originality in this. I'm sure I'm not the first person who's kind of made this point, but it's just something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So I don't know, Rob, if you happen to see what informed this was there were 2 interviews that I saw. One was Trump with, he was being interviewed by like the 3 journalists, you know, I know at least one of the guys was a Fox News guy. But anyway, there's like 3 journalists sitting down interviewing Donald Trump. And I don't know if maybe you saw what one of his like highlight moments in it was that he was kind of attacking everybody for not being pro-Israel enough. Like all the Democrats are, you know, Joe Biden's weak on Israel. Chuck Schumer, he's Jewish and he's pro-Palestinian at this point. And this is Trump's take. Everybody else is too weak. I'll support Israel the most. And then he actually blurts out of his mouth, because he's Donald Trump, you know, which is, look, even when he's saying something I don't like, one of the best things about Donald Trump is he's just totally incapable of not blurting out what he's actually thinking. He almost does. Like, people point out the fact that Donald Trump is dishonest or something. Like the corporate media love to go after him for lies. Oftentimes lies that are just, you know, just kind of braggadocious, like saying he had the biggest crowd size when he didn't really have the biggest crowd size. And they'll repeat that over and over again because it's a lie. But while Donald Trump does lie, he also has this other quality that almost makes him more honest than any other politician, which is that he's totally unguarded, and unguarded in this very bizarre way where it's like it never even dawns on him that maybe you should be guarded. You know what I mean? Like everybody else is like, how did you even say that? And he's like, what? You just blurted out. That's how you say things. Anyway, so Donald Trump blurts out at one point that Israel has really lost control and influence in our government, but as president, he'll make sure they get it back. Which was just like an unbelievable thing to hear a president, former president, a presidential candidate, no less the America First guy, saying, I will work to make sure that this foreign government has more influence over our Congress. You couldn't imagine this being said about any other country. Anyway, So there was that. And then I also saw, and I don't know if you caught this, but Thomas Massey was on
so
Tucker
good.
Carlson's show.
I love that.
Just phenomenal. Absolutely. I mean, the two of my favorite guys to listen to, and they were phenomenal together. I don't know what it is about life. And I'm sure everyone could relate to this on some level. But you know when there's two people you really like and they get along and that just makes you happy? Or like they do something great together, and then it's just like and then if there's two people you really love and you're all hanging out and they just like are oil and vinegar, like you're like, shit, like these two people and I love both of them and they just don't like each other. I've had both of those things happen. But there was something about Massey and Tucker that really just made me like, oh yes, I knew these guys would have a great conversation. Anyway, Massey, if you saw the portion about AIPAC and Israel, it was incredible. And it was like, by the way, as someone who I think studies this pretty closely, I totally didn't know about a lot of that. I didn't know that every single member of Congress has an AIPAC guy and that they have to submit papers to them. And that this is why Thomas Massey's hated by them, because he was the only one who went, no, I'm not writing you a Why I Love the Jews paper. Like, why should I have to do that? Anyway, so I'm just watching both of these interviews, and I tweeted shortly after watching both of them, or maybe it was like when I was thinking back on them, but I tweeted, Thomas Massey is more America first than Donald Trump, and it's not even close. So just objectively, he's taking the America first position. And anyway, kind of interesting that the most libertarian member of Congress is outdoing the most popular Republican in the country at his own game. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. And the tweet went like super viral. It's got like 20,000 likes on it now, which is a lot for Twitter, at least for my Twitter. So just the amount of responses that I'm getting, this is what started making me think about this. And it's so many people who are like, Trump supporters who are like, so, okay, but Thomas Massey isn't running for president, so why even say this? I got a lot of that. Why even say this? Why even take shots at Trump now? Like, why even, And it's funny because, and this comes up a lot. I think this has been kind of like a consistent theme through our podcast, is that there are, and I think it's one of the reasons why people find value in this show, is that I'm just playing a different game than so many political commentators out there are. And so many of them pick their guy. And they're like, this is my guy. I'm getting behind this campaign. And then everything is like reasoned back from that. And that's not me. Like, I'm just not. So I'm just in the business of telling the truth. I'm not playing really any type of political game. I mean, like, I'll every now and then, like support a political strategy. And obviously, like, I'm a member of the Libertarian Party, and I was a big part of the Mises Caucus effort over the last few years. But even that was always just in the attempt that maybe we could get some candidates who will just tell the truth. You know what I mean? And then like wake people up like that. It was always like, let's be in this realm of just telling the truth rather than in the realm of really like power politics. And so it's almost kind of baffling to me when people ask something like that, like, why even tweet this? Why even say Thomas Massey's more, America first than Donald Trump? Why take shots at Donald Trump? And it's like, oh, you're playing a different game. You're playing the game of we're trying to get Trump into power, and I'm playing the game of telling the truth. The reason I said it is because it's true. And so I just wanted to say it because it's true, and it's kind of interesting to me. And anyway, this kind of brought me to my broader point. That is what I've been thinking about. And I'm sure you've noticed some of this too, Rob. But there is this really awful dynamic in politics where when it's election season, everybody, or at least a whole lot of people, feel this need to kind of like snap into place. This is all that matters now, is this election. And it's very easy to justify that once you start playing that game. And it might even be justified. I'll say that. It might even be justified. If you were just like, hey, let's say one guy is 10% better than the other guy. And you mean that you go, that's going to make life tangibly better, 10% better for like a whole lot of people who desperately need it. Then maybe the move is to just, I'm not going to say anything negative about him because that might hurt him. I'm only going to say positive things about him because I want to get him over the edge. Maybe that's the right thing to do. my feeling in life is that like, that's not my calling to do that. And that at least somebody has to just try to tell the truth. It's to just try to plant a flag and say, no, I'm just going to tell you what I think is right. And so that means even if it's in campaign season, and even if I think Trump is a little bit better than Biden, I'm not going to shut up about what he's bad on. I'm not going to stop talking because like, and by the way, I should say, Rob, this isn't even just like people on the dole. I'm saying like people who are not getting money from the campaign, who are just like people on social media with followings, commentators or influencers or whatever, who just get all in to the point that if they're asked any series of questions about Trump, they're going to defend him. And same with Biden. There's people like that. And the thing that really sucks about that is that when it's election time, so many people feel this need to just never say anything that could hurt their candidate, never criticize their candidate. But of course, the problem there, like this major fundamental problem there is that this is the time you should be the hardest on them. This is like the one time where they need something from you. Your vote, your support, your money. This is the one time where they actually like just for example, right now, the America First side of the Republican base could really put pressure on Donald Trump right now to like assure them that he's really going to govern as an America First president. Think about it. He came to the Libertarian Party to try to, because he needs that demographic. Think about the America First right. You're talking about tens of millions of people. They could just say right now, like, no, dude, if you're talking about appointing any of these swamp creatures, we will sit this one out. We'll take another 4 years of Joe Biden if you don't do this. And he would have to at least lie. He'd have to at least pretend to move over in that direction. It's like you have some leverage right now. The one time a politician needs something from you, they need your vote. They need your money. They need your support. Once they get in there, they don't need anything from you anymore. It doesn't matter how unpopular it is, what they want to do, especially someone like Donald Trump. He doesn't have to worry about re-election ever again. Okay, you could argue he has to worry about the Congress or something, but, really, he's never as incentivized to listen to what his supporters have to say than an election year. And so, of course, in this time, they're just doing nothing but kissing his ass. Anyway, that was my whole opening rant. I don't know if there's any you want to comment on it at all.
I agree 100%. Slam him for Israel and slam him until he agrees to go ahead and prosecute Fauci.
Something, and at least that he's going to put like true outsider America First type people in his cabinet. And don't get me wrong, he said he was going to put a libertarian in his cabinet, and I hope he does. Massey would be a great choice. I'd hate to lose him in the Congress, but Massey would be a great choice. There's lots of great people out there who he could put. You name the position and I'll give you like a really good person for it. But that's, okay, we're going to get one, but I understand he's not going to staff his entire cabinet full of libertarians. He's not a libertarian. Okay, fine. But like, at least the pressure should be that they have to be like real deal outsider America First types, that these are not swamp creatures. Like, and there's no reason to have any of them. Forget any of those people who tell you like, oh, they're the ones who know the swamp or something like that. That's bullshit. That's just how they trick you into getting John Bolton as your national security advisor. You don't need, there's plenty of people who are experts in the way things in DC work that aren't swamp creatures that you could get, and Trump, no, he appointed Colonel Douglas McGregor to be like an advisor at the Defense Department. Like that's your guy. Not just some guy you put as an advisor in the lame duck period. Like that's got to be your Secretary of Defense.
I think that would be one of the most important interview questions to ask of Trump of, hey, last time around you hired a bunch of establishment insiders and they worked against you and the positions that you were fighting for. What are your plans this time around? Well,
but the problem with Trump is that he gives an answer. I've seen him get asked. Maria Berteramo at Fox, she asked him something along those lines. I think I might have mentioned this on the show, but it was like one of the most human moments I've seen from Donald Trump. Like a moment where he actually admitted some fault, kind of, but then he was just so Trump about it. So he said,
we'll have the best people.
Yes. So she basically goes, you said you were going to drain the swamp, and look, the swamp isn't drained. And it's as swampy as ever in DC. And which was a great question because, like, how can you deny that? How could Trump himself or any Trump supporter deny that? He'd be like, nope, totally cleaned up. That's why I just got convicted of 34 felonies. You know what I mean? Like, yes, clearly the swamp still exists and was not drained. And he was like, I'd only been to DC like a few times before I was president. I didn't really know people here. I didn't know all the guys. I didn't know who to put in all the positions. But then, of course, he's Trump. So then he goes, now I know all the guys. I probably know him better than anybody else has ever known him in the history of the world. I know who all the guys are. I know, and that's just what you're going to get from him because that he only has one speed. But like, there's never been like a true, and even if you look at, say, like the VP shortlist and some of the people who have been floated out for positions, it's like, oh man, how is there even talk of Marco Rubio or, Pompeo or any of these guys? And there's just too much. I'll just say this. Another thing politics does is it tends to have this effect on people because they inherently get desperate. And so they just want to believe their guy's the guy. They just want to make excuses away for all these guys. But if you're just trying to be really sober and analyze things, Donald Trump has sent many, many signals that he hasn't learned anything, and very, very few that he has. He's still talking about buying the FBI a brand new building or whatever. He's bragging about the vaccine still. He's talking about how Europe should kick in more money to Ukraine and then bragging that it was a loan and not a gift. He's, all in his only comment on Israel at this point seems to be that like the Democrats who are funding and arming this war aren't funding and arming the war quick enough, and they sent some food to some Palestinians one time. So haha, what a bunch of wusses. It's like, this is what we're getting from him. Just look, read what he's telling you. I don't see any reason to think he's like learned a lot. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Proton VPN, to further protect the journalists, activists, and everyday citizens who use Proton Mail. Proton created Proton VPN. Proton VPN breaks down the barriers of internet censorship, allowing you to access restricted online content. Proton's secure VPN sends your internet traffic through an encrypted VPN tunnel to keep your browsing data safe, even over public or untrusted internet connections. As a Swiss VPN provider, Proton does not log user activity or share data with third parties. Their anonymous VPN service keeps your browsing history private and enables an internet without surveillance. Proton VPN is available on all your devices, including PCs, Macs, smartphones, and even routers. A secure internet connection you can trust is essential to maintaining your privacy on your laptop at home, your mobile device on the road, or your workstation at the office. To check out an exclusive limited time offer, go to protonvpn.com/Dave Smith. This is a limited time offer, so go check it out today. protonvpn.com/Dave Smith. All right, let's get back into the show. I will say, I did like the thing that he stumbled into the other day. We could transition to that. This was an interesting campaign pledge from Donald Trump. Let's play that clip.
This is the first time I've said this, and for those hotel workers and people that get tips, you're going to be very happy, because when I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips. We're not going to do it, and we're going to do that right away, first thing in office, because it's been a point of contention for years and years and years. And you do a great job of service. You take care of people. And I think it's going to be something that really is deserved. More importantly, popular or unpopular. I do some unpopular things, too, if it's right for the country. I do what's right. But so those people that have jobs in restaurants, whatever the job may be, a tipping job, we're not going after for taxes anymore.
All right. So there is Donald Trump. I found this obviously because of who we are. I think this was particularly interesting to us, but I did think this was a strange one. Like, I didn't think I would hear that campaign promise from Donald Trump. I don't even know. Is that even a federal law about what percentage of tips get taxed?
Well, I mean, if you're,
I mean, I guess that for federal income taxes, that's a stupid question, but like, I don't know. Is that he's gonna like, it's not really something a president could just do, I don't think. Wouldn't that take some type of law from Congress? Anyway, regardless, that's not really the point. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't want to steal your thunder on why this is so great. So I'll hand it back to you.
Well, okay, so this is what I was thinking. I memean, I'm sorry, I'm in a particularly ranty mood today, so I don't want to go for too long because I do want to get your thoughts on this. But, Murray Rothbard, who really had more of an impact on me probably than any other thinker, he, in the 1990s, well, I guess late 80s, 90s, he left the Libertarian Party and he joined the Republicans. And he got way behind Pat Buchanan in 1992 when he ran for president. And he basically was advocating that libertarians embrace right-wing populism. And he kind of drew up a plan for what the libertarian who wants to be a part of this right-wing populist movement should be about. And in a lot of ways, it didn't materialize for a number of reasons. But in a way, there was something really beautiful about what he was trying to do, because populism, when you think about it, is populism is kind of devoid of any type of legal theory. Just by definition, that's not what it is. In the same way that libertarianism is devoid of any, comment on many different things, just as it's a legal theory. And so it's not going to tell you how to treat your wife or what church to go to or anything like that. So populism in the same way is just being fed up with the elites and recognizing that the elites are screwing over the common man and being on the side of the common man. But that doesn't tell you what I mean? Whether you should be economically left or right or libertarian or whatever. It's just, and so I don't know. As I was watching Donald Trump make this pitch, it's dude, it's such low-hanging fruit for you. Yeah, of course this is popular. Of course it's popular to let people keep more of their own money. How is this not a huge part of the Republican pitch? How is it not if you want to have this populist energy, it's yeah, okay, you don't want the money going to those elites. You want it staying in the working people's hands. And there's a huge thing that you can offer these guys. Everybody, the progressives are always pretending that they're scrambling for a plan that's going to help the working class, when meanwhile there's this huge thing that you can just do for them that's so tangible and immediate. Why not just give it to them? Anyway, any thoughts on any of that, Rob?
It's such a fascinating slippery slope admission from Trump on behalf of the elites of, hey, we can actually let you keep more of your money, and we are stealing your money, and we're taking it from you. And so the way that the left likes to operate is everyone's got to pay their part, and you got to file, and you got to do all these things, and then we'll give you plenty of free stuff. We'll cover your health care, or if you pay your taxes and you file, if you needed that money more, we'll hand it back to you, or we'll exempt you from it, and we'll send you this in the mail. But everyone's got to be in our system. It comes from us. You all got to hand it over, and then we'll decide whether or not you needed that money back in the way of some other social benefit. We'll cover your kids' schooling. We'll cover your this. But everyone's got to pay. This is such it's almost usually outside of the playbook, because they don't want to give you back any control over your life and say, yeah, we are stealing from you. And you know what? You deserve to keep your money. And this kind of does open up the door to the conversation of, well, why are the tips off the table? Why is that the thing that's not going to be taxed? The same way that you start looking at student loans, You're like, why do these people get free money from the government? Is it just because it's part of your winning coalitions? You're just going to hand them free money? What about all the people that didn't go to school? They didn't party. They didn't take on this debt. They don't have the opportunities for higher incomes. Why are you not going to give them why? If you're telling me that the problem is that some people are crippled financially, then why don't we just make that the handout? Let's look at who's in the crippled financially category and help them. So this is usually not something that politicians would ever say, but as a libertarian, you're like, wait a second, did a mainstream politician just admit that taxation's theft, that you're taking from people?
Well, that's right.
I mean, way to win.
Yeah, it's just, well, at least how big a win it is, I don't know, but I did find it very interesting. And I guess part of it is exactly what you just said. It's just all this stuff. I think sometimes as libertarians, it's almost like taxation as theft is kind of like the the slogan that so many people know about us. And it's almost like the first, I mean, I don't know exactly the first, but it's one of the first kind of like things to being a libertarian is like, you don't like taxes. That's kind of like what the layman knows about libertarians. And almost because of that, sometimes it becomes this kind of, well, that's basic. And we want to talk about something a little more interesting than that, like what's going on today, or there's some conflict or some, dynamic in our culture. But you do kind of forget just, or at least it's easy to kind of lose sight of how much that is just such a huge force in our economy, and that it's so indefensible on its face. Like it's so, I remember it's Scott Horton used this like this metaphor, but I always just loved it so much. But his thing was just imagine if the USSR was still a thing and the Soviet Union invaded America and conquered America. And let's just say we had been a free country up to that point, like no income tax, no central bank or something like that. And they instituted, for the first time, we had never had an income tax, and they instituted the USSIRS. And this is, we've just been conquered by the communists, and now they set up this new system where it's a crime to be productive. And the penalty is a fee. And the more productive you are, the higher your fee is. So it's just like in that scenario, wouldn't we all just see what's going on? It's like, oh yeah, we've been conquered by a communist enemy. And of course, they want to undermine capitalism. So this is what they're doing. They're making it a crime now to be a productive member of a free market society. The punishment is a fine, enforceable by jail time. And then the better a capitalist you are, the more we're going to fucking fine you. But it makes no sense at all in like a professed free capitalist society. It's just ridiculous. And, there's this, just this crazy dynamic where politicians are walking around trying to tell people what they can do for them. And this one rarely comes up. Like, we could stop enslaving you for a third of your year. Like, isn't that just so obvious that that's the thing to tell them? And so even when you just see it brought up once, it's like, oh, okay. Even if it's just in this one little sector, it's just kind of interesting to stumble into that. And the message could be enormously popular. I mean, and like this is something that could really carry a ton of votes. Like if you made it a real central point in your campaign that you were going to lower people's taxes drastically, and they could believe it, like if you were believable and could sell that to them, you can't tell me that wouldn't like carry a ton of voters behind it. There's still a lot of people who like, how would that not be more important to them? I'm giving you an immediate raise. That's my pitch. You immediately get a raise if I'm elected. Why, and why wouldn't the kind of right-wing populist energy want to pick up on the like pocket aces that are just laying there that you could play? It's there really was something in what Rothbard was saying about them needing libertarian theory and us needing, kind of something that can appeal to a mass movement of people for the right reasons. All right. So what do we, let's see here. Okay. So maybe you want to talk about Alex Jones a little bit, Rob?
We can get into AJ. They're actually cracking down on him. So I think there was a $1.2 billion judgment. It was for claims that he had made that Sandy Hook was a hoax, and he lost lawsuits for spreading misinformation and
defamation. I think is what he. Yeah.
And it seemed very unlikely that I guess that was actually going to be collected upon or harm him. But the latest news is I guess he's looking into selling off the whatever it is, whatever his network is called. So
InfoWars.
InfoWars, that he can cover it. I think
he was like crying on the podcast a few days ago, saying they were going to shut him down. And I guess, is this what he was referring to on that? Because it came out that he has to sell like a few days later.
I'm not a fan, so it's hard to tell with him, but seemingly yes.
It seemed like some type of performance, you know what I mean? Which is, he's that kind of guy. Obviously, he's a big performer. But yeah, I wasn't. It seems like this must have been what he was kind of getting at, but I don't know.
just in the context of harms that were put upon us by the COVID regime and the misinformation that came from Fauci, the idea that people like you and I could make statements on a show that, I listen, he shouldn't have done what he did. Like, it was terrible.
Well, that's right.
And if you're the 10 families that had to deal with people coming into your town and harassing you because they heard something on Alex Jones' show, that's terrible. But it's not nearly as terrible as people whose kids had learning loss, lost their jobs, lost family members to drug addiction or cancer because of what we were told over COVID. So just the idea that this is the worst thing that ever happened to us, or that someone can be responsible $1.2 billion of damages for statements made on a radio show or podcast is just absurd.
Well, right. Look, this is just a matter of being able to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So the truth is that, look, Alex Jones has apologized for what he said about Sandy Hook, and I think that was warranted. He went in on, and look, I don't know exactly, to be honest, I don't know exactly the extent of how far he went in. I've heard like some of the clips like come up, but he definitely like had guests on and alluded himself many times to it being, an inside job, and it wasn't. It just did, like, none of it panned out. And ultimately he even had to back off of it and go, yeah, no, that was legit. Like, it was a real thing that happened. And Alex Jones has missed on a lot of conspiracy theories before. He's hit on a lot of conspiracy theories before. But one of the things that really separated this one, especially when you got it wrong, is that you weren't like pointing the focus to the FBI as the bad guys, or the CIA as the bad guys, or someone in the Senate, or someone at Bohemian Grove. Like, all of his things were always like the powerful were always the targets. But it was like, oh, this is just some parent who like lost their kid, dude. This is like someone living the worst nightmare imaginable. And if you made their life a little bit harder, oh man, that is just feels awful. That being said, there's a real problem from the perspective of anyone who believes in like a free society. There's a real problem when defamation can be defined as claiming that something was a false flag by the government. You know what I mean? And like that, if you claim that this thing was a false flag, you are now on the hook for legal action if you're wrong about that. Listen, that again, you can walk and chew gum here. You can feel however you feel about Alex Jones, but you have to admit that's already, that doesn't sit well with anyone who believes in any degree of a free society, that you could question that the government was behind something, and that could get you, there could be legal action over that. That's pretty concerning. Then you have, as you pointed out, Rob, the amount of money, which was clearly designed not in any type of like,
here's the damages, here's your compensation.
Yes, exactly. This was to ruin a guy, clearly. And ultimately, it's culminating in shutting down a voice who's very popular with millions of people. Now, no matter what you think about Alex Jones or what you think about that case, you might disagree with me on my assessment of his coverage of Sandy Hook, or you might agree with me and then disagree with me on this part. But like either way, don't you kind of have to say, we could be honest enough to say the government targeted somebody that they did not like their message. This was a person speaking to millions of people, and now it seemingly they have effectively shut down his apparatus to do that. Is that not concerning? Is that not something that you just look at on paper and go, no, that's not a good sign for society when you do that? I think
it seems like they found a new way to censor people. And just to speak to two of the things I saw just as most flagrant in the case was, one, they said that having this message being put into the world was harmful to these families as they couldn't heal and move past the incident. And I understand. If you're grieving off a lost child and then you have people screaming your child wasn't really dead, I understand why that is upsetting. I'm not downplaying that. But if the issue is that that's being proliferated in the media, so then what about the responsibility for any channel that then repeats that? So if you're CNN and you're getting coverage and call the exact same reactor going, hey, CNN, look, this person saying this horrible thing, and then you're putting the horrible, it's like almost if you and I in a private conversation and I said something terrible about someone and then you go and tell them, I get it, I shouldn't have said the terrible thing, but sometimes it's worse when you go and tell the guy they didn't even know that it happened.
Yes,
so it's like, firstly, the idea that there's harm for this being put out into the world, and then the people that amplify it, they don't have any culpability. I think that's bad. And then the fact that the prosecutors were saying, or I guess it was a civil case, but they were really even talking about the fact, like, we got to punish this guy to make sure he can't speak again. And they weren't even talking about, like, speaking about falsehoods. They were just talking about, we've got to punish this person and censor him out of existence. And they were saying things, not in that exact verbiage. It's a year ago. I don't remember. It was 2 years ago. But they were, like, saying statements like that in court.
Yeah, right. No, it was, they were very clear about it. No, but to your and to your first point there, because I think it's like stated differently, or I think what, like, this is in line with what you're saying, is that, well, what's the standard here? Like, I think that's what you're getting at too when you say, well, CNN, what if you're broadcasting this? What if one of your viewers hears this for the first time? It's like, is the standard here that if you say something and then someone listening to it goes and acts on that in a way that's harassing somebody, that now you're responsible for that? Now, I do imagine that Alex Jones, if you took, let's say, out of his entire audience, this huge audience, but you're thinking about 1% of the audience now. Say the 1% of Alex Jones' audience that skews the most toward paranoid schizophrenia. The 1% of his audience that's the most paranoid, you know what I mean? Like, people. That's a large number of people who, you know, are the type of people who might come up to you and say, like, there's a metal plate in their head that told them to come, you know, like, talk to you. Like, if he points his thing at you, I'm sure there's a big group of people who might make it really weird in real life. But we're asking what the standard is here, because if the standard is, if you say something, like if I just said there's some person I don't like, and then one of my listeners takes it upon themselves to go do something to that person, even though that's not directly what the lawsuit was, that was definitely what was in kind of like the public consciousness about why we're supposed to hate Alex Jones, or why it's kind of okay what they're doing to him. And that standard is just ridiculous. And I think your point was pointing out that, like, okay, if we held CNN to that standard, they'd all be shut down tomorrow. And not just for the Alex Jones thing, but for a million different things, like that, you know, like, and that's that just can't possibly be the standard.
Here's a cartoonish example. There was that kid who at one point was going on that birds weren't real. And it was a pretty funny conspiracy theory. Someone interviewed him on the news. Now imagine if that guy was screaming in an Alex Jones fashion that birds aren't real and they're government surveillance tools. And then all of a sudden CNN, because it caught on Twitter, they were broadcasting it all day. Look at this ridiculous conspiracy. These people are telling us that birds aren't real. And then some schizophrenic hears that on the news, finds out about some local guy who's raising pigeons or something else, and goes and harasses him because he goes, you're part of this government psyop, you're actually CIA, you're releasing their tools into the air to surveillance all of us, and they're harassing him. You're telling me that the original kid that said some stupid shit on the internet's responsible for, like, especially, you could say something on a street corner to nobody, someone could film it, and then it gets amplified, and then other people are hearing the amplification, and they're responding to that. I'm sure at no point in this lawsuit did they bring in the people that were actually harassing these families and actually validated the fact that it was because of what they heard from Alex Jones. Now, it might very well have been, but I'm just willing to bet that that wasn't actually even a part of the court case.
Well, and again, though, and as you're saying, because as you're saying it, it's just like, really, if you wanted to, even if they could trace it back to Alex Jones, it's just like, what exactly is the line between something like that and, I don't know, maybe someone goes and watches Scarface and then goes and kills somebody? Can you sue everybody involved in the movie? I mean, like, what is, you know what I mean? Like, you can't have this standard that you can't put something out there if you're not explicitly calling for violence, or not even implicitly calling for violence. You're not saying do anything to these people. You're just saying, you know, whatever your thoughts are on them. Anyway, it's look, as you said, we all know what's really going on here. And there is something that I do find just kind of like sickening about the people who celebrate it. I think celebrating people getting deplatformed, getting canceled, getting their voice diminished at all. There's always been something about that I've thought was deeply unsettling. You know what I mean? Like when you see people doing that, it's just like a little bit of like, oh yeah, you are the type who would just cheer on an authoritarian regime as they did really fucked up shit.
To me, the left is unprincipled and they don't realize that power mechanisms can be turned against them. So for example, a lot of them, you take down Trump for stupid horse shit like Stormy Daniels payments, they go, look, we finally got him. They don't care how they got him. They don't care how dirty you had to play to get him. They're like, you finally got him. Or in this case, some people, I guess they don't like that Alex Jones exists in the world. They don't really care how you get him.
Yeah.
They're like, good,
Yeah.
you finally got him. It's not a winning strategy because it empowers power structures to, just work against freedom. And you might have the upper hand now, but I mean, it's what the Democrats are screaming about now. I saw a headline just before we started the show of AOC being, if Trump gets back in office, he's going to put me in jail. So, like they kind of know, hey, why are we empowering power structures to be able to go after your political opponents? This is the same thing. Do we really want to live in a world where lawyers can make a ton of money going after people for things that they said on radio shows or on the internet or otherwise? You're going to create a bad vehicle for censorship.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, defamation laws they're dangerous laws inherently. And look, I think from a pure libertarian standpoint, you'd say that they shouldn't exist at all, that, people have a right to say what they want to say. And if people want to believe them, they can. But even if you're going to argue that, like, there are certain types of defamation that should be illegal, you should acknowledge that has to be kept so strict because it's such a dangerous power to say, you lied about me. You know what I mean? Like, and therefore, I can take legal action against you. It's a very dangerous thing because the act of lying about somebody is, there are certain cases where I suppose you could prove that it was a lie, but the act of lying, even if you're actually doing it, is, like lying isn't illegal. And I think we could all admit that just if lying in general was illegal, that would be a very creepy world to live in, right?
I'll just take a softer stance because I think part of what made the defamation suit so harsh was they're almost treating it like Alex Jones had killed these kids, which he certainly didn't. And these people clearly had gone through a terrible tragedy, but in establishing the difficulties that they went through and the trauma that they went through, how do you differentiate between having your kid lost from the act of an atrocity of a school shooter versus, statements made online that you were faking it? Clearly that's not as bad. So I don't know, if you have a factory and you're putting out soda and I got a big online presence and I say I know for a fact that there's poison in there and I ruin your business, there's very clear damages from false information that I put out into the world. And if I had no basis for making that claim other than I wanted to ruin your business, I've never thought about defamation outside of this conversation, but I can understand why you might want to police for that. But in the Alex Jones one, the damages are so far, like, how do you quantify that the damages were from what he said, not the actions that people took off of what he said, and not just trauma related to the actual incident.
It's not quantifiable, essentially. No, that's a very good point. But I just do think in general, look, even in the examples where someone is really lying, it still is something to kind of criminalize lying. And so I get your point, fair enough, about really damaging someone's reputation or something where there's a very tangible cost to it. But even if you think that should be illegal, you should recognize that, like, that's got to have serious chains around it. Like, you have to be able to demonstrate the damages. You have to be able to do that. You know what I mean? Like, there should be, and the truth is that in most states, defamation cases in the United States are pretty tough, much tougher than in some other countries. But again, this one, it just seemed like, to go the way it went and with the verdict, with the judgment as high as it was just kind of bananas. Okay, let's see here. Do we want to this video? Let's do the American College of Pediatricians video, because this was going quite viral.
And we have serious concerns about the physical and mental health effects of the current protocols promoted for the care of children and adolescents in the United States who express discomfort with their biological sex. This declaration was authored by the American College of Pediatricians, but really it was developed from the expertise of hundreds of doctors, researchers, and other healthcare workers and leaders who, for years, have been sounding the alarm on the harmful protocols that continue to be promoted by the medical organizations in the United States. Despite recent revelations from the leaked WPATH files and the recent release of the final report from the CAS review, these medical organizations have not changed course. So we are calling on these medical organizations of the United States, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry to follow the science and their European colleagues and immediately stop the promotion of social affirmation, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for children and adolescents who experience distress over their biological sex. In our declaration, we affirm that sex is a dimorphic, innate trait defined in relation to an organism's biological role in reproduction, male and female. This genetic signature is present in every nucleated somatic cell in the body and is not altered by drugs or surgical interventions.
All right, you can stop it there. I think you pretty much get it. Anyway, this is it should be noted, as a lot of people were pointing out, that this group is they're known for being like a more conservative group of doctors. There's a bunch of people out there on the left claiming that they're a hate group. I have not seen evidence of that. It does seem like they err on a more socially conservative side. That being said, it's an organization of pediatricians and you know what I mean, scientists and people who have degrees in these things. And what they're saying right here is, I don't know, purely scientific. And it's pretty amazing. First of all, it's just obviously basic morality or common sense could have gotten you to this place many years ago, as it did for many of us. But I don't know. It's just funny to listen to them say this and then hear, you know, people on the left online being like, this is just a hate group of doctors. They're hateful pediatricians in this group. Like, okay, seems pretty scientific to me.
Yeah, there's a real problem with the trans stuff that, and I don't think it's outside of government or lobbying influence, but once it gets the stamp of approval from whatever government agency is being considered healthcare, then every time there's a lawsuit, they go, well, this is acknowledged healthcare. So I think it's very interesting that out in England, I think they recently banned this or said that they were no longer recommending it.
Well, this is the point that she made, which I thought was a very good point, is that this, what's it called? The CAS review is this study that they did out in England that basically determined like that all this stuff is really bad for kids. And so they stopped. And the point she was making is that we can look at this CAS review too, but like they're not stopping here. So like, why if we have this same information they have and they're stopping, why are we not stopping? And that's what she was calling on the AMA and them to like come out and like, come on, like just acknowledge this is, how do you even call yourself medicine and you're supporting this? But I don't know. Any other thoughts on this, Rob?
I just think it's going to be long-term tough to have government institutions that continue to endorse this. And my guess is that there will be some sort of liability down the line for hardship done to kids that were transitioned at younger ages. That my guess is, unless the science gets better in terms of being able to transition people without harm down the road, I think for kids this is going to actually fade away.
Well, I hope you're right about that. It's still pretty sick that we experimented on a whole bunch of them, and you'd want to see it end as quickly as possible. But dear God, this I don't know what to say. It's a weird thing to even hear scientists at this day and time come out and give like a scientific reason for why this just doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, no kidding. Couldn't anybody just eyeball this and be like, I mean, at the very least, just go, no, not with young kids. Like, what? Like how it's just and I know that was a line for a lot of people. I know a lot of people did wake up to stuff at that line, but it's just crazy that wasn't unanimous. That everyone wasn't just like, oh, no, don't start talking to like 8-year-olds about gender.
Not just not unanimous, but talk of taking parents away from talk of taking kids away from parents that won't gender affirm them on the basis that perhaps that's child abuse. That you won't
that's child abuse, right?
Yeah, that you won't get them the necessary health care they need for their known medical condition.
Yeah, it really is something. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Babbel. This summer, you can start speaking a new language with Babbel. Why Babbel? Because it works. Instead of paying hundreds of dollars for a private tutor or fooling yourself with language apps that are little more than games, Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are designed by over 150 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel is designed by real people for real conversations. All of Babbel's tips and tools for learning a new language are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teachings. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. For instance, one study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is the equivalent to a full semester at college. With over 10 million subscriptions sold, Babbel is real language learning for real conversations. And here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. If you get started right now, you can get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/problem. That's BABBEL.com/problem for 55% off your subscription. Rules and restrictions may apply. All right, let's get back into the show. All right, we got a few minutes left here. So why don't we, you know what, we'll do this and then we'll talk stuff about the wars on the next episode. But why don't we, just because we were planning on playing this the other day, but I still am getting a ton of heat off of this Chris Cuomo debate.
I mean, I was upset with CDC when I left because they stopped tracking people that were infected that were previously vaccinated. So if you didn't track it, well, because then you couldn't report that there were people vaccinated that got infected.
But no, why did they stop tracking it?
Because I think there was a decision not to do anything that made the vaccine sound like it didn't work. I've always tried to be honest.
Right. Let's just pause it right there. That really is. I agree with you, Rob. It's an endearing but unbelievably naive response from Cuomo.
I was trying to say this in the nicest.
I was trying to say it in the nicest way possible, but there is something endearing about it. But as he sits there and goes, imagine all these years later, you haven't put the pieces of the puzzle together. As the head of the CDC is telling you, by the way, it's a stunning admission that the whole biggest argument that they have that's been thrown at you is bullshit, because they stopped counting the vaccinated who were getting sick. Because they didn't want the vaccine to look like it wasn't working.
They did everything they could to obscure the data set, including with COVID, dying from COVID, unknown vaccine status is considered not vaccinated. The way that they, within the first 14 days of you being vaccinated, you weren't considered vaccinated. So if you drop dead after getting the vaccine, oh, well, you weren't vaccinated as far as the law is concerned.
That's just another unvaccinated death on our hands.
And then what they pulled with the childhood vaccine study, where they ended up doing like 3 shots. I think by the end of it, like there were 14 people left in the study group or something. It was something real screwy like that. Oh, and then they did that even with the initial batch of people that they got vaccinated. From what I remember, this is all so long ago, they got rid of the files so that they wouldn't be tracking those individuals. Like the original ones that they vaccinated, that's not what they did. I'm sorry. I now remember. They vaccinated the control group because they said it would be immoral to have them unvaccinated, which meant that there was no longer an ongoing study.
Right. I'm vaguely remembering this. Well, yeah, I mean, look, but just imagine, right? Imagine being here in 2024, and when the head of the CDC goes, oh yeah, they were like cooking the books, like so that they wouldn't count the people who were unvaccinated or the people who were vaccinated but were sick. And imagine being Cuomo. Imagine how preciously innocent you would have to go, but why? Why would they do that? You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean why? What do you mean why? Because they were trying to sell this vaccine because the entire propaganda apparatus was solely laser focused on one thing in 2021 and 2022, and that was getting this needle in as many people's arms as they could. And so, yeah, they cooked the books. And all of those people, and by the way, even without this admission, we've been saying this the whole time, because as soon as you just know a few things like that, they counted unverified people as unvaccinated. So if they didn't determine your vaccine status, which happens all the time, then you were automatically counted in the unvaccinated group. And right away you were like, oh, okay, well then we don't have good data here. And then the 2-week thing, as you mentioned, and there were several other problems with the data.
PCR test being screwy. Yeah, even validating that someone, the whole thing was messed up.
So, but for all those people out there who you're sharing these graphs, as so many people love to, of the amount of people dying, and it was the vaccinated who were all the way down here and the unvaccinated all the way up here, all those numbers are bullshit. Like, you're just not working with real data. You don't know. And as the former head of the CDC here admitted or you know what, actually, we haven't come up to that part yet. Here, let's play the rest of it.
There were some major mistakes in the vaccines. They should have never been mandated. I also felt that people should have been more honest about the fact that there were side effects to those vaccines, and some people were actually harmed. The other thing, I thought there should be more honesty about the fact that the vaccines don't protect against infection. I remember Biden saying, this is an epidemic of the unvaccinated. When I was Hogan's chief public health advisor in Maryland after I left CDC, I was saying, wait a minute, 2/3 of the people that I'm seeing infected in Maryland have been vaccinated. I mean, the president of the United States said it. Biden said this was an epidemic of the unvaccinated. Tony wasn't aggressive in putting this in perspective. The CDC didn't put it in perspective. The reality is this vaccine, listen, it's a short duration in which this vaccine provides some efficacy, maybe 4 to 6 months max. If you came down and visited me and interviewed my patients, you'd interview patient after patient after patient that did not have COVID, but are very sick, right. You would say very sick, long COVID patients, and it's all from the vaccine. Now, what is it, Chris? Well, it's the spike protein is immunotoxic, all right? When you get infected, it's immunotoxic. But when you give the vaccine, we make the spike protein. Now, this is my opinion, okay? When I give you an mRNA vaccine, which I helped develop, and I've given to a lot of patients, and I've taken it myself multiple times, I don't know how much spike protein you make.
Right.
Because I give you mRNA, and then your body makes it.
Right.
So you make a little, you may make a lot. You may make it for a week, you may make it for a month. I'm now more of the point of view, and I wish the country would switch more rapidly. I'm more of the point of view, and in my clinical practice, I use the protein vaccine. So I know exactly how much spike protein you get. Your body's not becoming a manufacturing plant.
Right.
Okay. I give you a certain amount of spike protein that's not able to replicate, not able to reproduce itself. And I know the decay curve in the human body. And that's the vaccine I use now. It's made by Novavax. I think it's, in my view, it doesn't have all the nuances that we don't understand about those individuals that looks like there's prolonged production or impact or negative consequence from spike protein in some people that get the mRNA vaccine. It's still rare, but it's real.
All right. So that is, by the way, I forgot his name, but it's former CDC director Robert Redfield. Look, it's years later, and I think we all know a lot of this stuff, but it's a pretty stunning admission, and it is kind of still, even after my debate with him, it's still pretty great to see someone say this to Chris Cuomo's face, seeing as how he was the main guy in the media selling this stuff. But if you think about this admission here, that they cooked the books on the first part is that they cooked the books on the vaccine. And then the part is that people really are getting injured by this thing and they mandated it. It's just like how horrible that is. And what a stunning image. It's crazy an admission like this doesn't come with like shockwaves throughout the entire system. You know what I mean? And again, he says at the end that it's rare. And I think probably there's probably no doubt about that it's rare. There's billions of people I think have taken this jab. And so obviously it's rare, but when you're dealing in numbers that large, even rare is a whole lot of people who are going to get hurt. And then of course, as we've been saying, I don't know, Rob, but this is the thing we've been saying for years about it, right? Is that, look, even if it's a rare chance that you're going to get injured from the COVID vax, is depending on the demographic you're in, or I should say, not depending on the demographic you're in, it's also rare that if you get COVID, you're going to get very sick or die. That's also rare in every demographic. And then depending on which one, it might be very, very, very rare. And if you're in that demographic, now the question becomes, but wait a minute. I have a very, very, very rare chance of something really bad with COVID happening. And you're telling me I have a very rare chance of something with the vaccine happening. Well, how rare is that chance compared to this chance? And then, oh, by the way, you're saying the vaccine maybe protects me for a couple of months. So I'm taking this rare chance just to not get COVID in the next couple months. For a whole bunch of people, your mic's out. But for a whole bunch of people, that trade-off is not worth it.
Yeah, and remember that people that got vaccinated were sick for 2 days. It's not even like you were free from getting sick. You were going to get what might have been 5 days of illness and doing 2 days of illness.
Yep. Oh, that's right. And so anyway, just to have the former head of the CDC like pretty blatantly admit all this stuff, I don't know. It's pretty interesting. And of course, you can kind of just, I don't know, you can kind of just feel when someone's being honest and you're like, oh yeah, he's telling us a little bit of the truth about this.
And by the way, if Cuomo had an honest job and he was back at CNN, he could have had this conversation 3 years ago. He could have gone, hey, that's interesting. Why is the head of the CDC leaving in the middle of a health crisis? And it's because he disagrees with this Fauci fellow? That seems like a real interesting news topic.
And it wasn't even like, there's so many... like these kind of like debate shows have really blown up. And so there's so many of those, and like probably Piers Morgan is probably one of like the biggest one. And however you feel about, obviously a lot of the Piers Morgan shows, he puts on a show. That's his thing. That's kind of what he's an expert in, is putting on the show that people want to see. But like, you'll see everybody on every side of the issue on that show. But all through the pandemic, the corporate press, they never allowed these people to have like a real seat at the table, or like really come in and like, we're going to have you debate someone defending Fauci here, and like we're going to hash this out. And they just never even did it. Never through the entire pandemic did they ever once go like, oh, that would probably be worthwhile. Isn't it crazy how quickly the internet figured out that would be worthwhile? To have people like sit down and debate these issues, and the corporate media just like never does. And if they do, it's a 5-minute debate. Who can, fit the best talking points into a little segment before, the next Pfizer commercial or whatever. But it's wild that none of them, even after like the Great Barrington Declaration, even after like things like that, it just didn't even ever. It was never treated like, oh, okay, there are experts who are against this whole thing. We should hear from them. We shouldn't all just be lockstep with these guys. And I'll let you know what was really going on. But I will say, after this clip, I kind of genuinely believe Chris Cuomo didn't know that it was really going on. So there's that. All right. We're going to wrap up there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Of course, come on out and see us in Vegas next week. ComicDaveSmith.com for those tickets. And go see Rob all over the country with a summer porch tour. PorchTour.com. Check out Run Your Mouth, Rob's other podcast. It's excellent. All right. Peace.